We're getting new video tonight of a deadly fight that broke out at a military camp near Moscow. According to Russian media, these men were about to be sent to the front lines. And then one of the soldiers here is said to have upset his superiors. He was reportedly then beaten by members of a reconnaissance unit and by military police. And then afterwards, a mass brawl reportedly breaks out with knives and a man dies. Well, a man dies there before he even gets to the front lines in Ukraine. But this chaos, this sort of brawling, I mean, this is exactly what senior Russian General Ivan Popov was talking about when he spoke out after he was fired for criticizing Putin's war preparation.
As many commanders of divisional regiments said today, the servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine could not break through our army from the front. Our senior commander hit us from the rear, treacherously and vilely decapitating the army at the most difficult and tense moment.
And we don't know anything about what's happened to Popov since he said that. He's obviously been fired, but, where his whereabouts, his physical state, we don't know. We do know the Kremlin is dismissing those comments from a top general. Popov, though, of course, is far from the first general to cross Putin and to pay a price. Again, like I said, we know he's been fired. We don't know what else, if anything, beyond that. But we do know, the Wall Street Journal is reporting tonight, that General Sergei Surovikin, who has not been seen since Yevgeny Prigozhin's attempted rebellion, is now being held and interrogated. Surovikin, of course, was an ally of Prigozhin's, who led that attempted coup. And Surovikin is not alone. According to this report in the Wall Street Journal, at least 13 senior officers have been detained for questioning after the Wagner Group's uprising. That's pretty stunning, at least 13, and about 15 have been suspended from duty or fired. And then there's Prigozhin himself. He still has not been seen since the insurrection. But for the first time, we're hearing from Putin about his alleged meeting with Prigozhin and 35 of Wagner's commanders, the meeting that Putin's spokesperson said happened a few days after the insurrection, a meeting that was said to have happened in Moscow. Speaking to reporters, Putin claims that he told the commanders at the meeting that they could continue to fight, but under a different leader. He then claims that the men were not in agreement. All these Wagner troops, they were totally in agreement. But he says Prigozhin, who was sitting in the front row, he says he spoke up and said, quote, "No, the guys do not agree with this decision." That's what we're seeing here in this exchange with a reporter. Now, keep in mind, we do not have any photo evidence or corroboration that the Putin-Prigozhin meeting took place or who was there. This is what the Kremlin is telling us. But keep in mind, Vladimir Putin is saying that the generals agreed that nodded in fighting for him, but highlights Prigozhin saying, no, the guys do not agree with this decision. Well, that's the context around which we have not seen Prigozhin since. President Biden says the U.S. has no idea what Putin has done with Prigozhin. He spoke today.
Determining what happens to Prigozhin, God only knows what he's likely to do. I'm not even sure, we're not even sure where he is and what relationship he has. If I were he, I'd be careful what I ate. I'd be keeping my eye on my menu.
Matthew Chance is out front live in London. And Matthew, what more are you learning about just how deep this goes inside the Russian army? This is obviously not just Prigozhin. It's not just some people in the Wagner group. It seems to be much deeper.
Yeah, it does. And the fact that this is all meant to be behind closed doors, it wouldn't normally be aired in public, I think indicates to us just how deep it does go. And remember, we're not just seeing the things that you've just described, but we're also seeing Russian generals, Russian officers, as well as, kind of men in the ranks being killed at an alarming rate on the battlefield as well. So while you've got this military that wants to project itself as being in control and the sort of epitome of order, in fact, it looks increasingly like it's in disarray. This is how the Russian Defense Ministry wants to portray its army. Well trained, equipped and effective. But the reality looks increasingly chaotic, with the recent battlefield death of one top general. And now another saying he's been fired for telling the truth about the dire situation on the front line.
Now it is possible to confidently say that an order was issued and I was removed from my post.
General Popov was the commander of the Russian 58th Army, heavily engaged in battles around Zaporizhia in southeastern Ukraine. One of Russia's most senior commanders, he says it raised questions about high casualty rates and the lack of artillery support. One Russian MP criticised his audio link as a political show, but there's been no official pushback on its content.
I had no right to lie in your name, in the name of my fallen comrades. So I outlined all the problems which exist.
It feels like another swipe at Russia's beleaguered defence minister, Sergei Shoigu, seen recently touring this Russian arms factory. Russian military bloggers, often the only source of comment in the absence of any official reaction, say his chief of staff, Valery Gerasimov, signed the order to have Popov removed.
Шойгу! Герасимов! Где
There are unmistakable echoes of the criticism made by the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who went on to lead an armed uprising against what he said was an incompetent Russian military leadership. That ended in failure, we think, but it seems discontent among Russia's senior officer class may be widespread, a worrying sign for the Kremlin. And there's still no word about what's happened to this Russian commander, General Surovikin, last seen calling on Wagner to abandon their mutiny last month. The Wall Street Journal is now reporting he's been detained for suspected Wagner links. Though this senior Russian MP is now playing that down. Surovikin is not reachable, he told this Russian blogger, and is resting, he says. Well, Aaron, there is so much happening, it seems, with the Russian military. As all of that takes place, the Russian Defence Ministry have been taking control of Wagner's, the mercenary group's heavy weapons and ammunition. So there's been some dramatic images of that as well. And it seems that the Kremlin is tightening its grip and sort of purging dissidents within its ranks.
Matthew, thank you very much. And I want to go now to Thomas Grove, the Wall Street Journal reporter who broke that story that I mentioned at the top of the program about more senior Russian military officers being detained and questioned in the wake of this mutiny, along with retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, who is, as you know, the former commanding general for Europe and the 7th Army. So thanks to both. And Thomas, let me start with you, because this is pretty incredible reporting you've been able to track down, you and your team, that more Russian military officers have been detained and fired in the wake of the Wagner coup. And you're also reporting that General Surovikin is not just resting, he is being detained, he has been held. Tell me what more you're learning about that.
So what we're seeing is basically an emerging picture of the crackdown on Russia's military circles, following the attempted insurrection. And so, what we understand was that hours after that aborted march on Moscow happened, General Sergei Surovikin he's detained by the FSB, which is a very unusual move, to have Russia's domestic security agency detain a military officer. That's not according to protocol at all. And it only happens in very, a few cases where you can have either, the top political leadership, that being Putin, or the head of the Security Council, Patrushev, giving the green light to that. And that's exactly what we're seeing. That's the kind of importance that they're giving to Surovikin's case and everybody else who they're looking at and questioning right now.
I mean, it is amazing. And General Hertling, I mentioned a moment ago, Putin talking to that reporter today, saying that in that meeting that he says he had with Prigozhin and 35 other members of the Wagner group, that they all nodded when he said, all right, you can keep fighting, but not for him, right? Under me, essentially. He says they nodded, and Prigozhin said, quote, no, the guys do not agree with this decision. I mean, General, what do you make of that? So Putin's now saying he had a meeting with the guy, and that the guy says, I don't agree that these guys shouldn't fight under you. I'm not okay with that. He's missing at this point. Do you think that's all it is?
No, not at all, Aaron. And truthfully, this is just more indicators of the brittleness of the Russian military and the Russian political leadership. You know, I had an opportunity to go to Russia several times when I was still in uniform, and some of the things that are being reported now are not new. There have always been incompetent leaders in the senior ranks of the Russian military. They do not get the kind of training or provide the type of leadership that troops look to that will encourage them or be charismatic in nature. They are hidebound, overweight, fat. They don't know how to maneuver forces. And in fact, the war that they're conducting right now has not been anything like any of them have ever done before. It was interesting just watching Matthew's film just now. It's the same kind of thing I saw.
Yeah.
It is a demonstration of force. It's not a training exercise.